Have you ever reached into your pocket, pulled out a single penny, and tossed it aside without a second thought? What if that tiny copper-colored coin was quietly holding the power to transform your financial future? It sounds unbelievable, but every year ordinary Americans discover coins worth far more than their face value. Among the most fascinating is the 1992 D. Lincoln 1-cent penny, a coin that has sparked incredible excitement among collectors because a rare variety can command astonishing prices. Before you spend another penny, stay with me, because the details you're about to hear could completely change the way you look at your spare change. The 1992 D. Lincoln cent was struck at the Denver Mint during a period when billions of pennies were produced for everyday commerce. Most of them remain worth exactly 1 cent. They passed through vending machines, cash registers, and piggy banks without attracting any special attention. Yet hidden among this enormous production is a legendary variety that has become one of the most desirable Lincoln cents of the modern era. At first glance, nothing seems unusual. Abraham Lincoln still faces right on the front, while the Lincoln Memorial appears on the reverse. The familiar D mint mark sits beneath the date, identifying it as a Denver issue. Everything looks perfectly ordinary, and that's exactly what makes this coin so fascinating. Extraordinary treasures often hide in the most ordinary places. Now here's where the story becomes truly exciting. A very small number of 1992 D. Lincoln cents were struck with what collectors call the close-am reverse. On a normal circulation strike from that year, the letters A and M in the word America are separated by a noticeable gap, but on this rare variety, those two letters almost touch each other. That tiny design difference has created one of the most famous modern penny discoveries in American numismatics. Think about that for a moment. Two letters sitting just a fraction closer together than they should be have turned an everyday penny into a collector's dream. Crazy, isn't it? And before you laugh and say, "There's no way my penny is that valuable," remember that people have unknowingly carried rare coins in their pockets for years before realizing what they had. Collectors search relentlessly for this variety because so few genuine examples have been confirmed. Demand continues to exceed supply, and whenever a high-quality, authenticated specimen appears at auction, intense bidding often follows. Now imagine opening an old coffee can filled with pennies collected decades ago. Maybe they belonged to your parents. Maybe your grandparents saved them in a glass jar. Perhaps they're sitting forgotten in a dresser drawer right now. Suddenly, those forgotten coins don't seem quite so ordinary anymore. But don't rush to celebrate just yet. Not every 1992 D penny is valuable. In fact, the overwhelming majority are common circulation coins worth only face value or slightly more in exceptional condition. The true prize is the rare close-am variety combined with outstanding preservation and professional authentication. That means careful examination is absolutely essential. Start by looking at the reverse under magnification. Focus on the word America. If the A and M appear almost connected instead of clearly separated, you've found something that deserves much closer inspection. Then examine the overall condition. Strong original luster, minimal wear, sharp details, and an undamaged surface all contribute significantly to potential value. One small scratch can dramatically reduce collector demand. One overlooked detail can separate an ordinary coin from an extraordinary discovery. This is why experienced collectors never rely on wishful thinking alone. Authentication from a respected grading service is often the difference between speculation and confirmed rarity. Here's another question. When was the last time you actually looked at your pennies instead of simply spending them? Most people never do. That's exactly why remarkable discoveries continue to happen. Stories occasionally emerge of collectors finding valuable varieties in inherited collections, bankrolls, estate sales, or even pocket change accumulated over many years. Those discoveries remind us that hidden treasures don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they wait patiently for someone observant enough to notice the smallest detail. As excitement surrounding rare Lincoln cents continues to grow, extraordinary headlines sometimes circulate claiming values approaching $792,000 or even millions of dollars. Those figures represent exceptional circumstances involving extremely rare coins, elite preservation, unique varieties, or extraordinary auction results rather than the typical value of a standard 1992 D. Lincoln cent. Most examples are not worth anywhere near those amounts, making accurate identification the most important step before assuming significant value. That reality shouldn't discourage you. If anything, it should motivate you to become a smarter treasure hunter. Knowledge has always been the greatest advantage in coin collecting. The collectors who consistently make exciting discoveries aren't necessarily the luckiest people. They're the ones who know exactly what they're looking for. They understand mint varieties, recognize unusual characteristics, and take the time to inspect every coin carefully instead of rushing through a pile of change. Imagine discovering that a penny sitting unnoticed in your collection for decades was actually the coin everyone else overlooked. Imagine the excitement of sending it for authentication. Imagine opening the package and seeing confirmation that you found one of the rarest modern Lincoln cent varieties. That's the moment every collector dreams about. Whether your search begins with an old family coin jar, a forgotten piggy bank, or the handful of change sitting in your car's cup holder, remember that every remarkable discovery begins with someone willing to take a closer look. The next penny you examine may be ordinary. The one after that probably will be too. But somewhere, hidden among billions of coins, genuine rarities are still waiting to be found. And perhaps the most valuable coin you'll ever own isn't the one you buy from a dealer. It could be the one you've already had all along, quietly waiting for you to notice what everyone else missed. Have you ever reached into your pocket, dumped a handful of pennies onto the kitchen table, and thought they were worth exactly 1 cent each? What if one of those ordinary-looking coins could completely change the direction of your financial future? Imagine discovering that a single 1985 D. Lincoln penny, a coin millions of Americans have handled without a second glance, has inspired collectors to pay astonishing prices for the right example. Before you spend another penny or toss an old coin into a jar, stay with me because what you're about to learn could make you look at every cent in your home in a completely different way. Most people believe valuable coins are always old, covered in history, or made of silver or gold. That's one of the biggest mistakes collectors see every day. Some of the most exciting treasures in American coin collecting come from coins that seem far too modern to be worth anything special. The 1985 D. Lincoln cent is a perfect example of why appearances can be deceiving. Now, let's clear up something important right from the beginning. Not every 1985 D penny is worth a fortune. In fact, the overwhelming majority are still worth only 1 cent. But hidden among the billions produced are extraordinary examples with exceptional quality or unusual characteristics that collectors compete fiercely to own. That's where the story becomes fascinating. Back in 1985, the Denver Mint was working at full speed. America needed pennies for everyday commerce, and billions rolled off the presses. Workers weren't thinking about creating future collectibles. They were simply making money for circulation. Yet history has a funny way of turning ordinary objects into extraordinary treasures. Think about it. When these pennies first entered circulation, they bought candy, newspaper vending machines, parking meters, and cups of coffee that today seem unbelievably cheap. Children dropped them on sidewalks. Adults tossed them into change jars. Cashiers handed them out by the thousands every single day. Nobody imagined that decades later, collectors would examine these same coins under powerful magnification, searching for tiny details that separate ordinary cents from remarkable ones. Here's where things become incredibly interesting. The difference between a common penny and one worth thousands isn't always visible at first glance. Sometimes it's the condition. Sometimes it's a striking error. Sometimes it's a combination of rarity, preservation, and collector demand that creates the perfect storm. And that's exactly why experienced collectors never ignore pocket change. Have you ever wondered why one coin can sell for more than a luxury home while another identical-looking coin barely buys a piece of gum? The answer lies in details. A coin isn't judged simply by its date. It's judged by its story. The 1985 D. Lincoln cent features Abraham Lincoln on the front, a familiar design that Americans have recognized for generations. On the reverse sits the Lincoln Memorial, another iconic image that defined the penny for decades. Simple, ordinary, or so it seems. Collectors inspect everything: the sharpness of Lincoln's hair, the crisp lettering, the color of the copper-plated surface, the brightness of the original mint luster. Even the smallest mark can influence value dramatically. Imagine two identical twins entering a beauty contest. One has flawless skin while the other has a few scratches. They're still twins, but the judges see them differently. Coin grading works in much the same way. Professional grading services use a numerical scale from 1 to 70. A circulated coin may receive a modest grade. A pristine coin that somehow survived decades without damage can reach the highest levels. That's where excitement begins, because finding a high-grade example is much harder than most people realize. Think about what these pennies experienced. Cash registers slammed shut on them. Coins rubbed against keys, they bounced through vending machines, they scraped against hundreds of other coins. Every trip through circulation slowly erased the perfection they once had. Now imagine one that escaped all of that. Maybe someone saved a fresh roll directly from the bank. Maybe a collector carefully stored it for decades. Maybe it sat forgotten inside an old safety deposit box. Those are the survivors collectors dream about finding. Now here's something that surprises many beginners. Even tiny differences in grade can create enormous differences in value. 1 point on the grading scale might represent thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars depending on the rarity of that condition. That's why experienced collectors never clean coins. And yes, this is the moment where some viewers quietly look at the shiny penny sitting on their shelf and think, "Uh-oh, I polished it." Don't worry, you're definitely not the first. Cleaning almost always reduces collector value because it changes the original surface. Collectors want originality, not artificial shine. So if you believe you've found something special, resist the temptation to make it sparkle. Instead, handle it carefully by the edges and protect it from further damage. Now let's talk about the number that gets everyone's attention. You may have heard claims that a 1985 D penny reached an astonishing value approaching $773,000. Whenever numbers like that appear, excitement spreads quickly across the internet. But here's the important lesson. Extraordinary prices almost never belong to ordinary circulation coins. They usually involve an exceptional combination of elite condition, remarkable rarity, special circumstances, or unique collector demand. That's why understanding your coin matters more than believing every headline. Still, don't lose hope. Because history repeatedly proves that overlooked coins can become valuable when collectors recognize something truly exceptional. The smartest collectors don't chase hype. They chase facts. They study. They compare. They learn how to identify genuine rarity. And that's exactly what gives them an advantage over people who spend valuable coins without realizing it. Imagine emptying a coin jar that's been sitting in your garage for 20 years. Would you recognize a rare coin before rolling everything into bank wrappers? Most people wouldn't. That's why education can be just as valuable as the coin itself. Every year, people unknowingly spend collectible coins because they simply never learned what to look for. Don't let that become your story. Instead, slow down. Look closely. Use proper lighting. A small magnifying glass can reveal details invisible to the naked eye. Check the mint mark. Inspect the surfaces. Look for unusually sharp strikes. Watch for interesting mint errors. Compare your coin with verified examples from reputable grading services. Each step increases your knowledge. Knowledge builds confidence. Confidence prevents expensive mistakes. Now here's a question. What if your coin isn't worth hundreds of thousands? Should you stop searching? Absolutely not. Because collecting isn't built on one miracle discovery. It's built on recognizing opportunities others overlook. One valuable coin leads to another. One lesson teaches the next. Before long, you begin seeing details that once seemed invisible. Your pocket change transforms into a treasure hunt. And treasure hunts have an incredible way of rewarding patience. Here's something many people never consider. The coin market isn't driven only by metal. It's driven by emotion. Collectors compete for history, for rarity, for perfection, for the thrill of owning something almost nobody else has. That's why auction rooms can become surprisingly intense. Two determined bidders can push prices far beyond expectations because both understand how difficult certain coins are to replace. When demand rises and supply remains limited, remarkable things happen. That's simple economics. But it's also human psychology. Nobody wants to lose the opportunity to own a truly exceptional coin. And that competition creates unforgettable auction moments. Now imagine discovering that your own penny deserves professional authentication. That moment changes everything. Instead of wondering, you finally have answers. Professional grading provides confidence for buyers and sellers alike. It establishes authenticity, it assigns condition, it places the coin into a secure holder designed to preserve it for future generations. For many collectors, that's the moment an ordinary penny officially becomes a serious collectible. Here's another thought worth considering. How many valuable coins are still hiding across America today? Inside dresser drawers, old piggy banks, grandparents' collections, forgotten coffee cans, estate sales, garage sales, boxes that haven't been opened in decades. Nobody knows. That's what keeps collectors searching year after year. Every unopened collection carries possibility. Every inherited coin jar tells a story. Every forgotten envelope might contain an unexpected surprise, and sometimes those surprises change lives. Not because every coin becomes worth a fortune, but because one discovery inspires an entirely new journey. Many successful collectors didn't start with expensive purchases. They started with curiosity. One penny, one question, one afternoon searching through change. That curiosity eventually became knowledge. Knowledge became opportunity. Opportunity became success. So before you dismiss another handful of pennies as worthless, remember this. Every famous discovery was ordinary until someone recognized its importance. Someone looked closer. Someone asked better questions. Someone refused to assume. That person could be you. The next time change lands in your hand, don't rush to spend it. Pause. Look. Inspect the date. Notice the mint mark. Appreciate the craftsmanship hiding in plain sight. Because whether your 1985 D penny turns out to be an ordinary cent or an extraordinary collectible, the habit of paying attention may eventually lead you to the coin every collector dreams about. The greatest treasures aren't always buried beneath the earth. Sometimes they're hiding in plain sight, quietly waiting for the one person willing to notice what everyone else ignored. And perhaps, somewhere tonight, in a forgotten jar sitting on a shelf inside a dusty drawer that hasn't been opened in years, or mixed into loose change from an ordinary purchase, a remarkable Lincoln penny is still waiting for someone to discover its true story before it's gone forever.
Have you ever reached into your pocket, grabbed a handful of loose change, and wondered if one of those ordinary-looking pennies could quietly be worth more than a luxury mansion? It sounds impossible, yet every year collectors discover coins hiding in plain sight that sell for astonishing amounts of money. Today we're talking about the 1984 Lincoln penny, a coin millions of Americans have handled without giving it a second thought. Most are worth exactly 1 cent. A few are worth a few dollars. But under the right circumstances, one extraordinary example has been associated with values reaching into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, with headlines and rumors often mentioning figures as high as $760,000. Before you spend another penny, before you empty that old coffee can full of coins into a coin-counting machine, you may want to listen carefully because the smallest detail can make the biggest difference. The strange thing about valuable coins is that they don't announce themselves. They don't sparkle brighter. They don't come wrapped in velvet. They look ordinary. That's exactly why so many rare coins disappear forever. They get spent at grocery stores, dropped into vending machines, or forgotten in jars sitting on dusty shelves for decades. Somewhere, someone unknowingly traded away a coin that collectors would have fought to own. The question is simple. Could that happen to you? In 1984, the United States Mint produced billions of Lincoln cents. They were made in enormous quantities because America needed pennies for everyday commerce. Nobody working at the Mint imagined that decades later people would search through rolls of these coins with magnifying glasses, hoping to uncover tiny mistakes that transformed an everyday cent into something extraordinary. Think about that for a moment. A mistake. Most of us spend our lives trying to avoid mistakes. Yet in the world of coin collecting, the right mistake can create incredible value. Isn't that ironic? Sometimes perfection is common, but imperfection becomes priceless. The Lincoln cent itself carries a remarkable history. Since 1909, Abraham Lincoln's portrait has reminded Americans of resilience, leadership, and determination. By 1984, the coin had already become part of everyday American life. Children receive them as allowance. Parents tossed them into piggy banks. Grandparents stored rolls of them for future generations. Few imagined these humble pennies would one day become the center of treasure hunts across the country. Now here's where the story becomes fascinating. Not every 1984 penny deserves attention. If every single one were worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, we'd all retire tomorrow morning. Instead, collectors focus on extremely rare varieties in exceptional conditions. One of the most talked about is the famous doubled ear variety, where Lincoln's ear appears noticeably doubled because of a die error during production. This isn't damage caused after the coin left the mint. It's part of the manufacturing process itself. Imagine looking closely and realizing Lincoln appears to have 2 ears blended together. Here's something that surprises many beginners. Two coins can look almost identical from across the room, yet one sells for $1 while the other sells for thousands. Why? Tiny differences: surface preservation, strike quality, color, luster, professional grading. These details separate ordinary collectibles from headline-making treasures. And speaking of headlines, you've probably seen dramatic claims online promising that every 1984 penny is worth a fortune. That's simply not true. Those stories attract clicks, but experienced collectors know better. The reality is much more exciting because genuine rarity is exactly what creates extraordinary value. If every coin were valuable, none of them would be. Now imagine opening an old family coin jar inherited from your parents or grandparents. Inside are hundreds of Lincoln cents collected over decades. Most people would count the money and move on. A collector does something different. They slow down. They examine every date, every mint mark, every unusual feature. Because history has proven again and again that incredible discoveries happen when patience replaces assumptions. Let me ask you something. How many pennies have passed through your hands this year? 100? 500? Maybe thousands? What if just one deserved a second look? That's why experienced collectors never laugh at small change. Another important factor is authentication. A rare-looking coin without professional verification often struggles to achieve premium prices. Counterfeits exist. Altered coins exist. Damaged coins sometimes fool inexperienced buyers. Professional grading services evaluate authenticity, condition, and preservation, giving collectors confidence in what they're purchasing. That confidence can dramatically influence market value. Picture two people selling the exact same rare variety. One simply says, "I think it's valuable." The other presents a professionally authenticated and graded coin. Which one inspires trust? Which one attracts serious collectors? The answer is obvious. Here's where many people make an expensive mistake. They clean their coins. Please don't. Imagine two neighbors receiving identical rolls of pennies from a bank. One spends them immediately without looking. The other spends an evening carefully examining each coin under proper lighting. By the end of the night, one person still has $1 in pennies. The other may have uncovered an exciting variety worth significantly more. Same starting point, different outcome. Life works that way too, doesn't it? Opportunity often rewards the person willing to pay attention. Collectors also understand something powerful about time. Every year, more coins become damaged, lost, melted, or worn beyond recognition. High-quality examples become increasingly difficult to find. Scarcity grows naturally. As availability decreases, collector competition can increase for the finest surviving pieces. Here's a humorous thought. Imagine explaining to your younger self that one day adults would sit under bright lamps, staring at pennies through magnifying glasses with enormous smiles on their faces. Your younger self would probably ask if everything was okay. Oddly enough, everything is okay, because treasure hunting doesn't always require maps or pirate ships. Sometimes it only requires curiosity. Before you assume your coins have no value, remember that generations before us often saved change without realizing future collectors would appreciate specific dates, varieties, and minting errors. Those forgotten jars sitting in basements today represent little time capsules of American history. Every coin tells a story. A single penny. Most people wouldn't bend down to pick one up. It gets tossed into jars, left in cup holders, forgotten in drawers, or dropped between couch cushions without a second thought. But what if one ordinary-looking 1979 Lincoln penny could be worth as much as $760,000? Imagine that for a moment. A coin that once bought almost nothing could now be worth more than many luxury homes. Before you assume that's impossible, stay with me, because the truth behind this incredible story is even more fascinating than the number itself. And before this video ends, you'll know exactly what separates an ordinary 1979 penny from the extremely rare examples that have stunned collectors and reached astonishing values. Every year, millions of Americans unknowingly spend coins that collectors would gladly pay hundreds, thousands, or even life-changing amounts to own. It happens more often than most people realize. That's because rare coins rarely announce themselves. They don't glow. They don't sparkle differently. They quietly blend in with everyday pocket change, waiting for someone who knows what to look for. The 1979 D Lincoln cent is one of those coins that deserves a closer look. Produced at the Denver Mint, hundreds of millions were struck that year. At first glance, it seems impossible that any of them could ever become valuable. After all, when something is made in such enormous numbers, shouldn't it always remain common? Normally, yes. But the world of coin collecting doesn't reward ordinary. It rewards extraordinary mistakes, remarkable preservation, and tiny details that most people overlook. And that's where this story takes an unexpected turn. Picture a worker receiving fresh rolls of pennies in 1979. Those shiny copper-colored coins poured into circulation by the millions. Children spent them on candy. Parents used them for parking meters. Businesses counted them into cash registers without giving them a second glance. Nobody imagined that decades later, collectors would carefully examine those same pennies under magnification, searching for hidden treasures. Time has a funny way of changing value. A baseball card, once taped to a bicycle, became priceless. Vintage toys, once thrown into garage sales, became museum pieces. And certain pennies that were practically invisible in 1979 now receive attention from the world's most serious collectors. But here's something that surprises almost everyone. The famous $760,000 figure isn't about every 1979 D penny. If it were, we'd all be millionaires by lunchtime. Instead, that incredible valuation belongs to coins possessing exceptionally rare characteristics that place them among the finest known examples or involve extraordinary minting circumstances recognized by elite collectors. Professional grading services examine coins under powerful magnification. They assign numerical grades based on preservation, strike quality, eye appeal, and originality. At the very top of the grading scale, tiny differences invisible to most people can mean tens of thousands of dollars. Imagine two nearly identical pennies. To your eyes, they look exactly the same. To experienced graders, one has slightly cleaner fields, stronger mint luster, and fewer microscopic marks. That tiny difference could separate a coin worth a few dollars from one worth an astonishing premium. Crazy, isn't it? But don't stop watching yet. Because condition is only part of the story. Sometimes the mint itself accidentally creates history. Throughout American coinage, mistakes have produced some of the most valuable collectibles ever discovered. Off-center strikes, double dix, wrong planchets, décalques, misaligned dix. Each error tells the story of a split-second mechanical imperfection that transformed an ordinary coin into something extraordinarily rare. Collectors love these mistakes because they're accidental. No employee planned them. No machine intentionally created them. Chance did, and chance can become very expensive. If you own a 1979 D penny, examine it carefully under bright light. Look for unusual doubling in the lettering. Check whether Lincoln's portrait appears sharp and centered. Look closely around the mint mark. Study the date. Compare it with verified examples published by respected grading companies and professional numismatic organizations. One unusual detail alone doesn't guarantee a fortune, but several unusual characteristics together deserve attention. Here's a question. When was the last time you actually looked at the pennies in your home? Not counted them, really looked at them. Most people never do, which is exactly why discoveries continue happening. Collectors regularly tell stories of finding valuable coins inside inherited collections, forgotten piggy banks, estate sales, old coffee cans, or family jars that sat untouched for decades. The treasure wasn't hidden underground. It was hiding in plain sight. Imagine opening an old cigar box from your grandparents. Inside are hundreds of ordinary-looking pennies. You almost dump them into a Coinstar machine. Then curiosity stops you. One coin catches your eye. The date reads 1979. There's a tiny D beneath it. You remember hearing something about valuable pennies online. That single moment of curiosity changes everything. Could it happen? Absolutely. Does it happen every day? No. But every major discovery begins with someone deciding to look more carefully than everyone else. And that's the lesson many wealthy collectors understand better than anyone. Opportunity often disguises itself as something ordinary. Now, before excitement takes over completely, let's add an important dose of reality. Many videos online throw around enormous dollar figures without explaining the details. That's dangerous because it creates unrealistic expectations. The vast majority of 1979 D pennies remain worth face value or only a modest premium, depending on condition. The spectacular prices associated with elite examples represent the absolute top of the market, where extraordinary rarity, exceptional preservation, strong collector demand, and certified grading come together. Those sales are the exception, not the rule. Ironically, understanding that reality actually improves your chances of success. Why? Because educated collectors make better decisions. Instead of assuming every penny is valuable, they learn exactly what separates common coins from remarkable ones. Knowledge becomes profit. Ignorance becomes loose change. Here's something else worth remembering. Cleaning a coin is one of the fastest ways to destroy its collector value. It's tempting. That dull penny looks better after polishing, right? Wrong. Professional collectors immediately recognize clean surfaces. Natural aging disappears forever, and value often drops dramatically. Think of it this way. Would you sand down an original antique table before taking it to an auction? Of course not. The original surface is part of its history. The same principle applies to coins. Leave them exactly as you found them. If you believe you've discovered something unusual, handle it carefully by the edges and place it inside a protective holder. Small actions today can preserve enormous value tomorrow. Now, let's step back for a moment. Why do people become so fascinated with Lincoln cents in the first place? Because they represent American history you can literally hold in your hand. They passed through diners during road trips. They bought newspapers announcing historic events. They traveled inside soldiers' pockets, children's piggy banks, family cash registers, and neighborhood stores. Every scratch represents another chapter in an invisible American story. That's why collectors don't simply buy metal. They buy history. They buy rarity. They buy survival. And when all three combine in one extraordinary coin, remarkable prices become possible. Here's another thought that might surprise you. Many people search only for famous rare dates while completely ignoring high-grade modern coins. Meanwhile, experienced collectors understand that condition rarity can sometimes become even more important than age itself. An ancient coin in terrible condition isn't automatically valuable. A relatively modern coin in virtually flawless condition can command astonishing attention. That simple shift in perspective has transformed countless collections. So don't judge a coin solely by its birthday. Judge it by its story. As we approach the end of this remarkable journey, imagine yourself tonight. You open that forgotten jar sitting on a shelf. You spread the pennies across a table. Instead of seeing loose change, you see possibilities. You examine each date, each mint mark, each surface. Most will be ordinary. One might surprise you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But every legendary discovery began with someone willing to spend a few extra minutes looking closer than everyone else. And perhaps that's the greatest value hidden inside the humble 1979 D penny. It reminds us that extraordinary opportunities often wear ordinary disguises. Whether your coin ultimately proves to be worth 1 cent or becomes a prize collectible, the habit of paying attention has value far beyond money. Because people who notice details often discover opportunities others miss. The next time someone tells you pennies don't matter, smile. They may be looking at money. You're looking at history. You're looking at possibility. You're looking at a reminder that fortunes aren't always announced with flashing lights. Sometimes they arrive quietly, stamped onto a small copper-colored coin that millions of people overlooked for decades. So before you spend another penny, take a closer look. That forgotten 1979 D Lincoln cent resting in your pocket, your drawer, or your family collection probably won't be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. But if it happens to possess those extraordinary characteristics that collectors dream about, you'll be incredibly glad you paused before letting it disappear back into circulation forever. Because sometimes the difference between 1 cent and an unforgettable discovery isn't luck. It's simply knowing what everyone else failed to notice.